Welcome to Stevie G's Energy Corner. Today we're coming live with Dan Bakke from SciPac talking about EV charging stations, and we're kicking off a new season, new show. How you doing, Dan?
Doing great, Stevie. Thanks for having me.
Hey, yeah, man, because this is like the first one of the new series, so I don't want to say that you're like the guinea pig or the beta, but hey, look, it's always good to be the first one, and we
Oh, yeah.
can go from here. And then what's cool about this whole deal about the EV charging stations that everybody's working on, and different energy companies, the utilities are trying to figure out what they're going to do. Our government folks, agencies are trying to figure out what's going on. So, hey, this way we can take this to the trade shows and let everybody know what's going on and how to reach you guys, the gurus in the EV arena.
Well, thank you.
So,
I think it's a good time of the year to do this. We're starting off here with the new year, and a lot of opportunity to put in some stations when the ground is thawed in some places, and hopefully the
yeah.
rain subside, because you don't want to do this when it's raining out either.
Absolutely. So, hey, so you got your slides and your PowerPoint to educate all of us?
Yeah, we can get that started here. Let's just pull that up. So, what we take care of here at SciPact is what we try and cover the whole spectrum of the charging station installation, from the initial design and just kind of understanding of the program, the problems, and other things you need to assess, all the way down to maintaining the systems for the life of your electric vehicle. It can feel kind of complicated and has a lot of components to it. One of the things that we really try and do is hit a bunch of checklists while we kind of build these programs, and make sure that both the customer feels comfortable with what's going on, also the drivers, the fleet, the facility. There's a lot of people who are involved in these projects, and making sure that all of their risks and their questions are accounted for in these type of assessments and these evaluations. And lastly, in the rollout, is really important up front, because everybody's going to be involved with this, and vehicles are pretty personal. So it's important not to upset the apple cart, and make sure this whole system is geared towards that end use. And when we start these out, some of the most basic questions and the components that are most important to kind of understand are on the right hand side of the slide, and it's just kind of stepping back and looking at your fleet and facilities as one harmonious system. So where you're going to charge, how much you're going to need, how often are the key components, and then after that is, how do we keep this boat floating in the right direction and not springing any leaks as we go forward. The questions that we ask every one of our customers before we head out, in our initial discovery of what it is they need and how they're going to build their system, starts with what we're charging. What kind of vehicles are you using? What do you currently do? What are your operations like? Where are you going? Why are you going there? Sometimes that's important too, because you're hauling stuff or you're bringing stuff back. So we have to account for those kind of different loads in your fuel usage. Also, it's not very often that everybody's just going to take 100 of their vehicles and just swap them all out for EV. They're going to roll out through time, through a process, through how this has worked in the past. So we'll get an understanding of how this project is going to phase out. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 cars. Sometimes we're talking 120 different vehicles at one site. Understanding that process gives us the opportunity to build a budget and a timeline for our transition, and how you can accommodate that additional load over time. The next question we like to know is, how are you tracking vehicle usage now? Sometimes we have a whole system in place. Here's an output, and that's great. Other times it takes just some homework, sitting with some of the drivers, monitoring them a little bit closely for a period of time to get an understanding of how a vehicle's use is set up and how it continues to be used throughout the entire year. One of the questions we kind of ask as well as that is, what's the highest you've driven in a single day over the last couple of years, and what's your average? The next item is more of a operational one, or a logistics or geospatial one, and that's, where do you typically park your vehicles overnight? Do you have to park them there for a specific reason? And understanding kind of the parking design and overall parking culture is the next item on that question. When these chargers are coming to your site or your location, your fleet, whomever, often it isn't a decision for the boots on the ground, but they're given the responsibility. So in reflecting on what you're having to deal with, do you have any ideas? Most of the time, the fleet or facilities team has a really good idea of where to place these chargers, and understanding some of the nuances of those locations is where we can kind of come in. You don't want to drape your cords over your vehicle. You don't want to put them in a spot where they're regularly ran over. So adjusting some of those perceptions and getting a better idea of day-to-day fueling is also a component that we try and deliver to our customers in order to avoid a lot of the mistakes that we see or have seen and have to regularly repair. The next few items are parts that are more engineering driven and really help us develop a budget and a cost. Sometimes these items aren't always available, but they're important. Utility designs, architectural drawings, base map drawings. We work in the government a lot. They'll have large system-wide design packages for the whole facility, utilities, undergrounds. Any information like that is incredibly important to an electrical install. We want to be careful about where we're digging, how we're getting from point A to point B. We don't want to penetrate something underground. Any of that stuff is going to be critical. We also like to get some utility data. Utility information is always really important. I'm not sure if I have that on there. That also is included in those packages. How much load you're using in your capacity is something we test and validate before we install or put anything in place, which kind of comes down the line here in my presentation. And then lastly, electrical safety, arc flash stickers. EV charging stations are pretty high voltage, powerful in some cases, and we want to make sure that what we're plugging into has the appropriate safety features, has the testing and the breakers, and everything about it is safe, because we don't want arc event. We don't want any sort of safety concerns. So making sure that everything is in proper working condition is also really important. Next few questions are sometimes decisions that aren't decisions that are always made at the base level. Are you going to include government vehicles, GOVs? Are you going to include personal owned vehicles? Or are you going to try and blend those two in your charging solution? And then lastly, do you have any guidance from on high about working with specific chargers, what your timing is, and other expectations from the leadership that's typically giving you this mandate? These questions pull out a lot of details and allow us to kind of get into it. It looks like my grid here is missing, but first question we're going to go through is fueling operations. What rate does your vehicle charge? Each vehicle has an internal charger that has a limitation on how fast it can go. The average sedan right now has about 11 kilowatt output. The new F-150 Lightnings and the Silverados and the other trucks that are coming out in the market are a 19.2 kilowatt input in charging. So sometimes you'll pull up to a charger and it can only deliver 7.2. So pairing your charging needs with the output levels of your charger is a good assessment to have in advance. The average vehicle in a government-owned fleet, at least on a DoD base, is around 25 to 30 miles. So we typically try and get a charge overnight for a vehicle at least once a week, and that will accommodate most any DoD facility. Other places and other items that we kind of consider, especially with fleet vehicles who are servicing stuff, who are fixing equipment or moving around materials, workload, and also payload and how they use that. Sometimes what we'll do is if you have a regularly reoccurring location, instead of a high-powered charger at the home base where you typically park, we'll put little chargers all throughout to reduce costs, especially infrastructure, and you'll get little bites along the way. So there's lots of different ways we can kind of design or build out a charging solution for your fleet. And understanding that vehicle and its capacity for charge, how much it's going to use, and how much it can handle is a critical piece to building a successful program. Ultimately, this is the fastest way to figure out if it's going to work. This is the easiest, and sometimes the answer is no. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes an electric vehicle isn't the right decision for a fleet vehicle. There are government agencies who are mandated to do this, who service high voltage lines out west, and they are driving 300 miles a day and then driving 300 miles back. There just aren't vehicles that accommodate that. And doing these quick fueling operations assessments or these studies will help really give that quick answer. So let's say you're not working out in the Sierra Nevadas trying to fix a power line that's 400 miles out in the bush, and you're a fleet vehicle sitting on a Army base in Alabama. We're going to go to the next stage. What kind of equipment are you going to need to have these trucks work on your Army base today? You're going to need some infrastructure like switching gear, transformers, panels, and then also the chargers. What we do here is we understand how much electricity you're going to need, how much fuel you're going to need for your day-to-day operations. For the worst day where you drive the furthest, for the basic day where you drive your 35 to 40 miles. Having power where and when you need it. All right, we'll set up a map and plot your charging stations and how much capacity each one can deliver. We'll make sure that there's a functional design. We don't want to have these chargers being in an inconvenient place. Sometimes math tells us the charger should be right in the middle of the base. More often than not, the middle of the base is like where the PT is. It's a storage facility. It's not the most ideal location. People are going to be walking miles just to get back to their facilities after having to drop off a fleet vehicle. So putting some functional design in place, making sure that it's convenient. If we set these up in inconvenient locations, it's going to become inconvenient and the program's going to fail. Other things that are really important in design and equipment selection is just making sure that they're going to work with your billing cycle, that the function of the equipment is going to achieve the goal and also not break the bank. The next kind of component here is looking at these different types of chargers, right? How can you pick equipment to change that? Well, sometimes there's backup batteries. Sometimes you want a program that will work with your load management system and only charge at convenient times or when there is enough available electricity within your system. So designing these programs to kind of feed that fuel is the basis of the success is that study. And after that, the decisions become pretty easy in terms of where and how and why you choose a charging station.
So Dan, going back to where you said that you're putting the chargers in different locations and everything.
Yeah.
So are you putting different level chargers in the different locations? Like say I got to have a fast charge in this location, slow charge.
That's a great question.
In another location, so that now, so you don't have all fast charging stations all across, the location or the facility. You might have a range of different chargers based on what you guys find on your assessment of the vehicles and their usage, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And going back, I'm going to go back one more slide too here. We work with a variety of different customers. I keep referring to the one where the fleet, the Army base in Alabama. However, you could be like the Postal Service or the VA, and your fleet usage is a lot different. So that being said, let's say you're the VA hospital and you have a home-based VA and a couple of different clinics across the state. In terms of that, we know that the home base is where the vehicle is going to live. So we'll put in overnight charger. We'll call it a sleepy charger. Kind of like that name. It's cute. Put in a sleepy charger overnight, a level 2, nice and easy. However, out at these facilities, let's say that's 100 miles away. Okay. And that's a bit of a stretch. So what we'll do is we'll put a higher power, higher speed charger out at this facility out here, just one of them. So that way that car can go out, do its duties during the day and be confident and have enough juice to make it all the way back home, even if there's a detour. And so that's where we'll start putting in different levels of charging to accommodate those type of activities. Additionally, what we'll probably end up doing is putting one at the home base too, in the event, not that it ever happens, somebody forgets to plug in their car.
Yeah, we've seen that, haven't we?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's you want to have a backup plan. And in addition to that, right, these fleet vehicles are a critical component to mission, to the success of your operations, to the parts of your business. And so we also strongly encourage and often include making sure that some charging, if not all of it, is on a backup or an emergency circuit, or including a backup or generator system. Some of these charging station systems, some of these newer ones, some that we help service a little bit, have integrated battery solutions, and those are great and work really well, especially if they fit into the design. Often they're very expensive, and emergency and backup generation typically already exists on base. And depending on the quality of your power and a bunch of other things that we discover with your utility bills, like how often do you have to run your generators, we can help design a system that's safe and secure for your fleet to run as well. But hopefully you've got good clean power. But yeah,
Sweet.
different systems, different places. Backup is important. Different levels and sizes. Another thing that's coming along, or excuse me, we'll jump into parking first before we get into some other stuff. I have some comments about plug types, because that's become an issue, right? I'm sure you've seen in the news, like can Ford charge at Tesla, who's opening up their different networks, how all that stuff kind of works. So I'll touch on that a little bit here. But one of the things that always comes into play here is parking. Vehicles are personal. Where you park can get personal. Some people have special spots, employee of the month. Like it's always been, everybody wants to sit in the front, right? If I'm going to park somewhere and I've got to run in to grab a sandwich, to say, I want to be as close as I can, in and out, right? If it's whatever,
Exactly.
parking is, there's been fights. There's been, I'm sure wars fought over parking lots.
Yep, there's been that.
All right. So that being said, key considerations here. And I said it earlier, and I'll continue to say it. Don't let your cables drape over cars. Don't let them get run over. That is the biggest problem, right? I think most charging stations fail either due to theft or somebody drove over the plug. I mean, 80% of the time. Key considerations, though, for picking parking locations is how is the parking used? Municipal or base regulations. Sometimes parking is controlled by a third party, and there's a union involved, and there's organizations that you're going to have to work with in order to identify locations and make sure that they're going to get supported and not messed with because of requirements. Electricity usage often in parking lots can be a little spotty, so making sure that you're making decisions based on the most convenient and least amount of cutting and boring. Public versus non-public, sometimes a fence is important if you want to keep your fleet chargers charging for fleets. And then structures, arrangements, sizes, mountings, and lengths. All of that comes into play when placing these charging stations. From the pictures below, I took all but one of those pictures, and that's the aerial one. But I've seen this at every range, right? Placing a charging station in a row of vehicles parked in what looks like a weird stack of rectangles is a very challenging situation. On the far left, they didn't have enough parking, so they're parking on the median. So there you have concerns over safety. Bollards are going to be really important, protecting your equipment, because obviously people are used to parking wherever the heck they want. The third picture, actually, there's a charging station inside of that pile of snow. Knowing where they do that kind of work. I'm up in the upper Midwest. I see a lot of that. In the South or on coastal beach areas, we want to avoid sand exposure. We want to try and limit as much of the salt air as we possibly can. And then also when we look over on the far right, we have a parking structure. Penetrations, fire safety, accumulation of hazardous materials, all kinds of other things come into play inside of enclosed parking structures as well. So parking can get personal, which makes it a sensitive subject, and also how you place your charger and making it a convenient location and not a huge challenge in the long run is really important. And this here, frankly, is one of the hardest parts of this to articulate until you roll into a Subway on a hot day and you're running in and out for lunch, and that front spot is a charging station, and you say, you know what, I'm only going to be 5 minutes. I'm just going to quick park and run in and out. And as soon as that happens, that charging station becomes essentially useless. It's a 15-minute parking sign at that point. So you have to be careful about where you place these charging stations, and also, don't take away the most important person's parking spot either. If the boss parks up in the front right, you don't put the charging station there. That upsets the apple
Yeah, you
cart.
better not. Yeah.
All right. So and again, it's a common problem. There's always going to be one hitch in the giddy up. Often it is something like this, but through talking it out, being observant and patient and understanding of the system, sometimes the answer you're given is the answer that you got to go with. And so parking can often be, again, one of those components. Next, we have networks and security. For a federal market, there's a program called FedRAMP, and it's a network security protocol that has to be achieved. It's a certification, it's a stamp of approval that allows the government to give access to third parties like a ChargePoint or a Blink or other software company to run within that secure environment. To date, there are 2 FedRAMP certified companies that I've seen come public. I know a number of them are expecting May and June timelines for approvals. And once those are approved, it will give federal agencies and federal sites a little bit more comfort in terms of operating networks within their secure compound. The next one is the compatibility and plug type. And I don't have a lot of pictures on these. Actually, it looks like some of my pictures aren't popping through on my presentation, but that's okay. What's happening now is we're standardizing. Thank goodness. Most charging station types now accommodate 2 major plugs, the Tesla plug and the and we'll call it the other plug. Brain farting on my plug type.
Hey, that's all right. At least they're getting something, because the phones, you got Android and you got Apple, right? And the 2 of them, you can't interchange them.
Not yet. I mean, hopefully, right? Just recently, it's coming to single one. And the NACS plug, the Tesla plug, does offer a significant amount of benefits. And if a standardized solution comes about, it's obviously going to be that one with a lot of support from the auto manufacturers, especially in the US markets. Here we're seeing charging stations under warranty being given the opportunity to transition to that plug type. And as more vehicles come about, it will definitely become a concern, and those plugs will be available to be swapped out. I'm looking forward to that day to carry only one plug type, because with the CHAdeMO and some of the earlier plug types that are still floating out there, it can become an issue to source good quality replacement parts. Lastly, open protocol network. Charging stations, like building automation systems of the late, all kind of run on their own proprietary software. What has become a mandate but is loosely followed is what's called the OCPP, or the Open Charge Point Protocol. And what that says is everybody's got to work under these same guidelines, give this level of access, make sure that your charger measures the following key criteria, and is available for software to be run on. Now, we all understand that those basic levels can typically be achieved, but we have run into this, and we'll run into it again. Charger A doesn't work with Charger B software, and that's going to continue to be the basis until either a new security protocol comes out and wipes out everything and makes it very basic, or somebody just wins the race and controls all of the charging stations. However, at the same time, right, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket and have everything controlled under one system. So as time continues on, more systems will start to either open up and become truly open and work with a variety of different softwares, or like what you were saying earlier, the Apple or the Android, right? They'll go the Apple route and continue to maintain a very closed and very tight space. So kind of got to pick your poison. The manufacturers are currently kind of separating in those environments. I would say Tesla and ChargePoint are kind of taking a route towards the Apple. Blink as well is kind of following suit. And then some of the other providers like ABB, FreeWire, Tritium, I believe Siemens, and Schneider through EV Connectors are looking to expand their aperture and kind of invite a little bit more of an open environment. But again, who's going to win that race and how that's going to work out, only time will tell. Our goal here is just to be able to serve and accommodate those changes as time goes on. So let's say we're in good shape. We know how much fuel you need. We know where the best places for them to be placed. And now we're going to kind of hit where the rubber meets the road. We're going to provide site assessments and a package for you to deliver to your site. This is going to include, like we said before, this is going to include your fleet manager. It's going to include some folks from operations, maybe from installations command, maybe from the utility, hopefully from the energy group. And so we have to kind of accommodate a lot of different levels of technicality and also expectations. So we provide every level of picture and you should expect it as well. So that way your conversation with your peers, your conversations with colleagues outside of your department can go a lot smoother. That picture is 1,000 words. So we like to provide Google Earth. We like to provide side views with clear indications where things are going. We also kind of like to get into a technical component, the sizing of the breakers, the level of wire that we're using, how far the runs are, all kinds of different details. So that way everybody who's touching this project feels like they understand from start to finish what their group, what their patch is going to cover. These design documents are really important as well, just for future use and future planning. Understanding, maybe like I said earlier, you're only going to get 2 trucks today, 20 tomorrow, and 30 next week. And so we'll help plot out that expansion, especially because infrastructure can be restrained. Not every facility has ample power or the latest and greatest in electrical infrastructure, and it can get costly and expensive. And so if we can help slowly lay that out to achieve the goals, then you can take bites of that apple and still have success. So those expansion plans, understanding when vehicle deliveries will come, will help you prepare for those cash outpours or that contract mechanism or what have you, in order to make sure that the program doesn't falter and that you continue to have success. One of the items I have on here, and it isn't particularly called out, but can be a big concern, especially in public environments, if you're providing a publicly owned vehicle charging, is ADA. In many locations, having equal access to charging is really important. And being, I don't want to say clever or tricky or what have you, but sharing those stations in parallel with both a handicap spot and a non-handicap spot is a very good strategy. And also just making sure when you design these that you're not draping cables across access. If you put a charging station in a location that puts a bump or a cord across where a wheelchair typically would cross, or a handicap van may drive over, or what have you, it's gonna damage the cable. So again, it's not necessarily something that's always important, because we're not always doing public facing charging or charging stations where we'll see handicap access, because these are fleet vehicles in the back shop area. But again, it can come back to haunt you, especially in places where this is strictly enforced, and equal access will be your requirement. So we don't want to do that project twice, especially if it's a penalty. That makes it even worse. Lastly, installation. Installation has a lot of elements to it. This is where you can run into the problems that you may not have seen underground, like boulders. Places like Rock Island are just rocks. So sometimes here, this is one of our installations: trenching, measuring distances, validating information, setting footings, all of that stuff. Make sure your contractor is documenting a lot of this stuff. Photos are great. Measurements are important. Using markings to identify bolting and torquing requirements. A lot of that stuff is really important for manufacturer warranties, and making sure that those standards are being met are really important. Make sure they're in your contract, and you're being particular about them. Other thing that we found is parking. Again, here it comes back. Blocking stuff off in advance. Often when we do installs, we'll have cones and other things to put out. But soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, airwomen, they cones are movable objects. And so we'll set up and we'll prep everything with some cones and lay out some stuff, and even put up some "Don't Park Here" tape. And the next morning it's neatly stacked on the side of the road, and all of the cars are there. So those type of things that you can do at your site or at your location, planning, putting notices out to personnel, will make this installation move a lot quicker, make it a lot more seamless, and ensure success. Next item in there is just high and medium voltage. Making these, it's called the make ready in terms of when working with a utility or putting components together for a charging station. So those high voltage components, maybe placing a transformer, getting a drop from a utility pole, making those type of projects kind of work in parallel with your charger installation will really help reduce the back and forth. It will help ensure that if change orders are going to occur, that there are less of them, because having those two contractors work closely together will reduce a lot of the emails, waiting a couple of days. He's in the field, he's over there. Well, we don't know because that project hasn't started yet. Back and forth to make and create a greater success. We've seen timelines decrease from multiple months over a year down to 2 to 3 months, just because the coordination efforts were reduced significantly. Every installation is going to be different, and yes, every single one is going to have a bump. So just be ready for it. Have a little contingency and be patient. You're setting up a bunch of electrical infrastructure, and you're letting a bunch of humans use it, and there are going to be some issues. Some things might not work right away, and there's going to be a lot of human error, especially working in these new systems. So the first couple of weeks after we put these in, our time of answering calls and kind of helping people work through the system is at its peak. But once everything starts moving and grooving, more often than not, the only thing that we're doing here is restarting the system, or reaching out and making sure people are ready for the system update, and they're aware, and they can make sure that their systems are running and gunning as they should be. Operations and maintenance is another key component, running and moving as they should be. We have a project at Argonne National Labs. We've been working there for a while. They have charging stations that are 10, 15 years old, maybe. They are a laboratory that has done a lot of research on the different types of charging stations that are coming out, and they've done it for an expansive amount of years. They have a gas station or an electric depot where they do a lot of vehicle to grid testing. They do interoperability testing and all kinds of really interesting, incredibly nerdy EV charging stuff. And so their maintenance schedule and what we've been working with them on is pretty gnarly. Stations in the wild for 15 years and trying to keep them working, testing on them, doing little functional design tests has really given us an idea of how to maintain these type of stations. And it's testing those stations, making sure their output's good. It's a good indicator, right? If you get a whiff of something on your car, this is where we can smell it. Is it faltering? Is it not delivering equal power? Can give us a good indication of future problems with the charging station, and we can address them right away. Instead of it being a failure, it's a quick field repair. The next one is inspecting these equipments pretty regularly. This charging station head right here has a little hole in the communications port. That happens a lot. When removing the cable, somebody pulled up instead of directly out. So replacing these parts and having a whole lot of handles on stock is important. Having some backup is important. Another thing that happens a lot is there's it depends on where you live, but insects love those little holes. They're cozy. They're weather protected. And I'm sure they're a little bit warmer than wherever they're else at. So cleaning those out, we've got pipe cleaners that we stick in all of those, and we pull out all kinds of gnarly bugs. The next one is just moving and cable management. The sun, the cold, the heat, regular, just not moving that cable will cause breakages right there at that joint. So shifting and moving and just sometimes basic just care. It will keep those stations running a lot longer. And then lastly, this is a station that they installed without a pad, which is the one and only one they've done, fortunately. That was installed without a pad, but getting it off the ground would have been good to help with salt. But you know what? Here we are. We're not going to be able to turn back time. So we regularly service and paint and try and take care of erosion control. We also have some of those issues on screens, especially in like sea areas next to salty air. The screens can really take some damage. So regularly cleaning those and just accounting for the different impacts of salt in nature are really important. If you can install your charging stations in the shade, I highly recommend it. However, if you have shade, chances are it's a premium parking spot, and you're going to create some sort of tension if you take it. So good luck finding a shady spot to install your charging stations outside. It will start a fight unless you have ample shade. Next, some of the challenges and stuff that we run into a lot, and seem to cover in conversations every day, like some questions that we get. I mean, you've asked me these questions before when we've chatted, but like range anxiety. How do I get over that? Like what if I'm out in the backwoods and I'm going to run out of juice? That kind of stuff. So working with those fleet folks, doing some slow introductions to EV is always nice. Demonstrating that chargers are actually at your location. Remember those little nibble items that we kind of put out there? Having them always plugged in makes people feel more confident. In terms of how we kind of address this and talk about it here, is think about it like your cell phone. If you require your cell phone at 100% all the time, you're going to have a bad day. Same thing with your car, right? You don't drive around full up all the time. However, with EV, you have that anxiety, and fortunately, we can design our systems like that. You can put a charger out back. You can grab a charger at the restaurant. It'll be charged typically full up overnight if you're lucky enough to plug it in. So making that charging experience very convenient, easy to use, making it kind of a second nature, right? When you sit down at your desk, plug your phone in. When you pull into the office, plug your car in. When you hop home, even just to grab dinner and you're off to the baseball game or wherever, just grab that little trickle charge. 15 minutes here or there can get you 10, 20 miles. And then lastly is just starting to integrate this also with smarter grid capacity, being smart about your sources of power and having backup. Because again, this is a fleet. I can grab a bucket of fuel and fill up my car, right? I can't grab a bucket of electricity and fill up my electric car. But if it's hooked up to a resilient system, it's equivalent, right? I can charge it at any time. So making sure that we're addressing these challenges with practical, time-tested solutions is also a really important part of making these accommodate. And here, to your earlier point, this is actually a installation in Georgia we put in where we did add a few DC fast charging stations because this location was quite a ways away from a lot of the other charging places. But they do also at the same time have 3 or 4 overnight parking spots, but a lot of visiting cars. So we provided them with a solution that helped, we'll call it the out-of-towners and the folks from home. So these charging stations are changing all the time. New ones, faster ones, bigger ones, bells, whistles we didn't even know we needed or wanted. So making them more accessible, integrating battery tech into them, having charging stations with batteries included, like Tritium is doing, or some flow batteries to have boost, so it trickle charges this battery overnight that's inside the charging station. And when you pull up, you can get either a trickle charge, or you can go for the boost and fill up quickly and have it come out hot and heavy. More accessible charging stations, integrating these type of things into the urban environment. In Europe, in particular, it's bring your own cable. There aren't cables attached to charging stations. It's just a big old outlet. You got to plug in and you bring your own. Finding solutions that are less bulky and hang out. Some technologies now are trying to integrate the charging technology into the breaker. Just having a small little pedestal and a cable with either a QR code, little integrator, something small on the pedestal to really limit that size. And then the next few things that are really coming down is wireless charging. Roads are getting wireless charging. That technology, though, I'm not necessarily certain will work in every environment. The icy roads of Minnesota, the sandy dunes on the 101 that blows over. There's a lot of environmental aspects to wireless charging, and hopefully that technology will come along quicker than not. And then lastly, vehicle to grid, using your car as a battery to support your facility and drive energy into the building, maybe in a demand response environment, or in an emergency, you could drive your battery across town and go charge up the refrigerator out at your shed, and then drive back with like a mobile genset. So technology in the EVSC world is changing every day. It's really interesting. It's fun to follow. It's a pretty cool and novel technology. Outside of that, that's the basis of the presentation. I hope you kind of
Dan,
got something out of it.
I got a question for you. It's
Yeah.
and I know you know it, But we've run into
Oh,
like, okay, go back to where you got the government vehicles, right? Or
yeah.
or even if it's an Amazon place, right? And you got Amazon
Mhm.
vehicles and you got the public people coming to pick up packages or what have you, right? And they
Yeah.
want to charge. So I know you run the gamut of the different software packages out there, which ones work, which ones are the most convenient, or the ones that
Yeah.
give you the most data that you can collect and know whether or not the chargers are working, how much money's come to what, and gone to like third parties, like you guys setting up third party financing to put these in. Have you
Mhm.
found which softwares or which ones are being developed and moving forward
Yeah.
on?
So that's the charging as a service, right? Is the solution that we're taking here, and it's a financed thing. You take the money that you receive from charging the profit, and it goes towards a third party who paid for the infrastructure. Right now, those solutions are offered with a variety of software. I mean, it's a kind of a holy grail solution in terms of offering a function. Having those charging stations continually operating and turning the meter and making that and also turning a profit would be great, especially in a fleet environment. So software that works right now, all of the current providers that we work with, like the Siemens, the ChargePoint, the Blink, the EV Connect, and a few others, they all meet those parameters. And even some of them offer or bring financial partners to the table with that. That being said, the systems will work differently for different folks. So you brought up like an Amazon, right? Charging those Amazon charges out back for their vans is maybe one part of the equation, but then also offering that public charging will be a different part of the equation. So each software has its benefits, and the charging as a service or your financial program that you're kind of mentioning is
Right.
available through almost all of them. It's just what financial institution or vendor has an appetite for fleet or public charging or the mix, um, and kind of bringing all of those to bear and picking the one that you as a customer is most comfortable with. I myself really like to get into the details, so I prefer a software with too much information, frankly.
Right.
But
Well,
on
that's
the other
the
hand, there's
that's the
software and
government
platforms.
facilities, right? That's the government facilities are going to want that. Can I charge both public and government vehicles out
Yeah,
of the same charger? You know, based on what credit card, whether it's a government credit
yeah.
card or it's my personal credit card, right?
With a fleet
When it's
card
plugged
or
in, there's a different
yeah,
rate, different rate of charging, different rate of cost, all that data that they're going to want to collect, right?
yes, that yeah. So that again, so one of those components is that is a double-edged sword as well, because the more the more you have to protect it. So those data points and collecting that information becomes secure and important to keep in house. So some agencies maybe like tenant agencies don't necessarily need all that degree of data, and as long as the billing and the financial information is readily available, they're okay with it, because
Right.
they aren't as concerned about energy management, or they design their system to not worry about electricity usage. And so again, using the money will come. Let's be honest. If you're going to be charging your vehicle regularly and it can be tracked, the depth of the software is more for the folks who have to deal with the cars. And having that level of access and having that level of comfort to make it successful is the most important part of the project. And that's the only way that the finances are going to work as well. So, in terms of what the best software is, it's the one that the fleet manager and the facility manager like the most.
You got it. Well, I appreciate you coming on and being the
Yeah.
first one to the Stevie G's Energy Corner. It's the first show, first episode. So, hey, thanks for coming on and being the first.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate the invite. Always enjoy talking EV and anything energy related. So really enjoyed my time here. Let me know if you want me to come back.
You got it. Not only that, but we'll send you the link to it, and you can utilize it to customers. And hey, it's all about educating people on the next facet of what's coming out there, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Where there's no competition here, right? We just all want everybody to enjoy the same sheet of music.
You got it, man. Hey, thanks, Dan, for coming on. I know you're busy. You probably got phone calls of people needing their chargers either installed or updated. So, hey, thanks for
Yeah,
coming on and taking the time.
you're welcome, Stevie. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.
You got it, buddy. Bye.